Hello, I'm Wanda Wallace. I'm a speaker, consultant, trainer, coach, and author. And today on the show, we're going to talk about how to avoid getting caught by the Peter Principle. That is, how to get out of your comfort zone and thrive. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Can you clearly show how your leadership is evolving? Because if it isn't, it's dying. How realistic are your corporate leadership models, the ones that you're following, in terms of balance between expertise and spanning? Or are you just trying to know it all? Well, a couple of leaders might have tried that before. Stay tuned, because that's what we're going to examine on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I am the Dragonist, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. To find out more, you can simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you by the Dragon's Lair. Have you discovered your next evolution? Imagine being in a virtual classroom where I personally walk you through live trainings where I reveal the techniques and strategies that I previously only offered to top CEOs, C-suite executives, high-level entrepreneurs, athletes, and entertainers. And then being able to access each of those trainings exclusively with the workbooks on demand. Well, that's what many of our listeners are now discovering they can do, and they're part of that opportunity. You can simply go to www.patreon, that's patreon.com/Dov Baron to find out about the Dragon's Lair. In just 2 minutes, you can join us. In fact, you can even get access to past episodes on subjects like uncovering your genius blind spot, ethical persuasion, becoming a meaning-driven leader, resilient leaderships in time of chaos, and so many more. Just go to patreon.com/Dov Baron now and secure your seat. If you're a new listener, new viewer, I want to thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. If you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, there's a lot to do. And depending on the size of your organization, you might feel like you have to wear a lot of hats. So do you need to be a specialist or a generalist? If you think the answer is an expert, I would ask you, is it possible that your expertise has made you incompetent? I know, think about it. And as a specialist, do you play well with others? Sometimes we don't. However, as a generalist, can you know enough to solve real problems? It's a leadership dilemma. We are going to confront directly today and give you some rock solid tools to deal with it on this show. You see, our guest on this episode is Dr. Wanda Wallace. Her passion is about helping leaders at all levels improve the quality of their conversation. She says that better conversations equal better relationships and better performance in every aspect, from strategic insight to talent to teams to individual capability. Wanda believes that better conversations are the heart of creating inclusive cultures where all team members thrive. From her early years, she's been fascinated with how people make sense of the world, how they understand the events of their lives, and where they find meaning. And we know that matters. How they view their preferences and their biases, and how they construct their realities. In business, this has translated into understanding how leaders make sense of their role and how they see their strengths and their limitations is fundamental in their effectiveness as a leader. Her latest book is called You Can't Know It All. No, you really can't. It's about how leaders view themselves as either experts and therefore knowers or enabling spanners. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome the author of You Can't Know It All, Dr. Wanda Wallace. Good to have you here.
It's good to be here. Thank you. And what a great welcoming. I love it.
You're welcome. Very welcome. Now, where we always like to start our show is in this time of where every man and his dog is an influencer, whatever the heck that means. Who is somebody who we might not know of who has really influenced you and your leadership style? It might be somebody we know, but it might be somebody we've never even would consider, never know of at all. Who's that person might be for you?
There are a bunch of people who've influenced
Sure.
me. And I actually write about this on my website, just all the people that have been there. But I'm going to talk about two, if I may, Dov.
Please.
One that might surprise you and one that probably won't surprise you at all. But the one that might surprise you is a guy by the name of John Murphy, who was CEO at Bell Helicopter. And I met John early in my career as in doing this kind of work. And it's through John's eyes that I really get to see what it means to be the CEO of a company. And so kind of having that, someone who can guide me through the decisions, the challenges, the questions. I mean, it's just been tremendous mentor and influencer for me to understand the CEO's point of view. So that's one person that's influenced me. That's the easy one. Let me give you a harder one, though,
Sure.
which is my father. Now, like many of us, we're influenced by our parents in a host of 100 ways. And my father was a very complex character, as it is true for many of our parents.
Absolutely.
I have my best memories from him of childhood, and I have my absolute most horrendous worst memories of him. The journey for me as an adult is to hold both of those parts of him as being true. He had some wonderful qualities that I still love and adore and emulate. And I try like heck to avoid some of the darker ones. But coming to see those two and that they're in the same person has been, actually, that is the philosophy of what I believe about leadership. And it's sort of through that journey that I form my own view of what it means to be a great leader. And what I mean by that is, particularly as a woman, how to hold the balances that are required. To be soft and to be hard.
Yes.
Make that fast decision, sharp, quick, fast, and to be open to influence, to listen a little bit more, to push, to pull back, to be masculine, to be feminine. That balancing of polar opposites, which I take from my journey of reconciling my dad, is really kind of what I think is heart and soul and what I do today.
It's fascinating you say that, Wanda. As you know, you and I talked about it. With my background in psychology, it's fascinating to me that human beings, all of us, love to shove things in a box and say that's what it is. But nothing is that. Everything has a multitude of complexity. And at one end of it is very dark, and at the other end of it is incredibly light and beautiful. But most of it is in varying shades of gray between those places. And it's easy to say this person was bad or this person was good, but nobody is entirely a demon and nobody is entirely an angel. And I think that as a leader, that's one of the most challenging things, particularly as a leader of others, because leader of self is one thing, but leader of others is because it's not about whether this person is all good or all bad. It's about whether they fit the culture. And so the culture becomes the definer. Like, okay, what's our culture? Is this? Does that person fit? No. Are they lovely? Yes. But they don't fit with this. And it's a really, really cool thing to do. But it takes extraordinary strength and courage to say, I can see you in all of you. I can see the magnificent. I can see the terrible. And they're all in there. Yeah, it's a really great point. Thank you for that. I appreciate you sharing that with us and opening up with that, because it allows people to see that in the ones they lead. Now, in your book, you talk about being this expert knower versus being an enabling spanner. Now, I'm going to come at you with that word because I'm a Pommy. I'm a Brit originally from Australia. We have spanners. We don't have wrenches. We have spanners. So to see that in an American book, I was like, we got to go there first. Why a spanner?
We struggled with what to call this because I would like to kill the word generalist from our management vernacular. I just don't think it helps us at all because you can't be a pure generalist and lead. Not today, just not possible. So I'd like to kill that. And then we struggle with what word do we call it? We must have been through 100, but the spanning word is the only one that's stuck. And the reason it's stuck, in spite of the British use of the word, is because you are spanning across a number of domains. That's your job. Right. Some of which you have expert knowledge in, but not all of them. So it's that ability to span that is the key factor.
Right.
Does that do it for you?
It does, yeah, because I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is a whole new tool.
No.
So one of the things you and I had talked about previously, which is, I think is a really interesting tipping point in how you look at leadership, is you and I talked about the Peter Principle, that people are promoted to the level of their incompetence. They do really well in sales, and then they're turned into a sales manager. They have no idea how to be a sales manager. They don't know anything about managing anybody else, but they're good at sales. And some people don't even know how to translate that into teaching others how to sell. They just do it. And so that level of expertise becomes this massive stumbling block that keeps them stuck. And you sort of come at that in a very different way. Talk to us a little bit about how you come at that.
Well, first off, we always say they've been promoted beyond their level of competence, which therefore means we need to get them out of the organization. Go, bye. You're no value anymore. And I say instead that they've been promoted beyond their level of expertise, which is the truth. Right. And now the trick is not to become an expert in how to be a sales manager. The trick is to learn how to span, how to lead others when you are not the expert, when you're going to allow them to know more. And there are skills, there are tools, there are tactics, there are ways of learning that skill, but the secret is to stop trying to be the one who has the answer. Okay?
Right. Okay.
And it's when you stop and talk to people who are in that stuck spot and you help them understand that being the expert is what got you to this seat, but it isn't what's going to make you progress in this seat. And it's a new world. It's a new game. It's a new set of rules. It's a new set of behaviors. Let's learn the new skills. They start to go, oh, right. It's not that I abandon my expertise, it's that I add something else to it.
So from your point of view, just want to make sure it's clear for everybody else. From your point of view, it's not about being the expert, but it's not about being the generalist. It's being this new hybrid.
Exactly.
Where you have your expertise that got you to the place, but you can't cling to that for safety. And that's what most people who are experts do, right?
Right. So let me back this up for just a minute.
Thank you.
I think that in the modern world, expertise is deeply baked into absolutely everything we do, and we deny it. It's in our language and it's in our expectations. So let me just highlight that for everybody so you understand why I'm making such a big deal out of it. So if I'm going to work for you and you're suddenly my boss, my first question is, what the heck do you know about what I do? And if the answer is nothing, I'm going to have a pretty bad attitude about who did you know in order to get that job. And that's not fair. And, so that tells you how much the company values me. Right. And that's true whether it's a customer segment, whether it's a data scientist, whether it's technology, whether it's a product knowledge, whether it's law, whether it's engineering. If you're my manager, I want to know you know enough that I can go to you and debate the pros and cons, or I can bring you to my customers and you will have an intelligent conversation with my customers. Okay, now, as a leader, when you take over a new group, what's your number one thing? I need to have a vision and I have a strategy. That means I know best what it is that needs to happen in this group. We go to hire somebody, even in a high-level position. We don't hire somebody who's just a great leader who knows nothing about the industry. We hire somebody who's got expertise and who's largely already done that job someplace else before. It's so all over everywhere, and our expectations of meritocracy, of who deserves the promotion, it's everywhere. And part of this is to highlight, yes, that is one model and it works in a particular way with some limitations, but it isn't the only way. And so what I want people to understand is at some point in your career, what you're doing is a blend. Yes, you have some expertise, and then you're going to be leading areas where you no longer can maintain all the knowledge, or someone else already knows much more. And your job then is fundamentally different. It's not about executing yourself or telling people how to execute. It's about enabling other people to be successful. Still the work has to get done, still accountable, but I'm doing it in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the things that's happened in the last 15 years is, of course, the internet. And the internet has democratized information. And a lot of leadership was about how I can hoard it all. My precious, my precious, my precious information. And if I've got that, that's my leverage. And it's very difficult for people who've gotten that mentality, and any of us who are over 45 got that mentality at some point, to actually go, no, actually, that's my weakness. It used to be my strength. It's not that it wasn't a strength. It was. But now if I hoard the information, it's a weakness. I've actually got to turn it into a strength. And by actually democratizing that information and getting it out there so that I've now got this resource of everybody else. And talk to me about dealing with it at that level, Wanda, because you work, of course, with clients, with customers who are your clients, who are leaders and organizations. You must bump into that, oh, you want me to give up the precious?
Yeah, well, we all get afraid. I mean, the fundamental question is, I'm going to get afraid if my content knowledge and my ability to execute aren't what brings value to the company, then why the heck do you need me?
Exactly.
And that's going to call into all my insecurities and all my fears and everything else with it. And so I'm going to do my best to make sure that you can't do it without me. Okay. And in fact, I would argue that the most secure position in the organization is when you know the company can't get stuff done in your area without you. And it's not so much I have information that I won't share. I know all the nuances. I know all the screws to turn. I know which pipe to bang. I know who to call. I am a whole bunch of tacit or implicit knowledge that I can't, even if I tried to share it, I couldn't share it with everybody. And there's security in that. No question. No question. It just doesn't create leverage. It doesn't create collaboration. In fact, I would argue that it fights against collaboration.
Yeah, it does, because how can you collaborate with somebody who's hoarding?
Well, even if it's not hoarding, even if I'm being generous with my information, I come to a collaborative session with a group of other leaders to solve a problem where I believe I have the answer from my perspective of my expertise.
Right.
And part of what I have to do is abandon that perspective in order to see that it might not be the only piece of the puzzle. It's awfully hard to do when my entire value is driven by that expertise, even in the best of interest.
Yeah, so that brings us then to the practicality of it, because this is all very nice in theory, and people will listen and watch and say, oh yeah, I kind of get it, and then do exactly what they normally do. That's what people do. But would you say it's fair, would it be fair to say that your book, You Can't Know It All, is a how book rather than a why book? It's like how to put these things in. So walk us through some of the how of this, because I want to take it out of the ethereal and make it very practical.
Right. It is a how book. First, we have to understand why I think this distinction is an important one. And that's why I've spent so much time driving that home. But the how, there are really three fundamental pillars for the how. The first one is getting your head wrapped around the value that you bring to the organization when it's not about your content or your ability to execute. It's something else. And what is that? And core to that question is, why is your team willing to follow you? Based on what? I have to have that credibility, or else, I give a few months, but after a while it's over and they will move right past me. So what's defining that value? Okay, and I can come back and say how you do that and what that's about and so on in a minute. The second pillar now is the question of, so what am I doing? Like, if I'm not doing the work, what am I supposed to be doing anyway? And how do I make sure that my team is doing the right stuff? Okay,
Yes.
so an expert, I can be sure, I can check, I can confirm. When I'm not the expert, how do I know?
Right.
Okay, so I'm not sure that there's a mistake on my watch that matters. And then the third pillar is it fundamentally changes the nature of every conversation you have with people. All the interactions turn. Because when I'm the expert, I can sit down with you on the team or in a collaborative meeting, and we can have a debate about the facts. And we'll resolve our conflicts by going back to the facts and the details, because that's where we live.
Yes.
When I am not the expert, I can't go back to the facts. I can get my team member maybe to go back to it, but I can't. And that's where I have to start to lean into all that emotional intelligence stuff and the political savvy stuff and the connections and the network and so on. All of that, the relationship pieces, are all I have anymore to interact with people, and they become front and center. Okay, so 3 pillars. How do I add value? What work am I doing? How do I know it's the right work? And how do I relate to people as a result? Now, underneath each of those, there are a whole bunch of bullet lists. So where do you want to go with that question?
Well, I mean, let's pick a piece from each one. Let's pick a piece from the first one and say, okay, because I want to make it really practical for people so they can really grasp it, because I really do believe that what you're offering here when we talked about this before, it could seem on the surface to be general. It's like, okay, you need to be a mix of generalist and specialist. Okay, but really I find that the formula you've brought to this shows great depth and the need for practicality of it. And that's why I want to bring at least a piece of each one of those 3 pillars forward so people can go, okay, because I want them to actually get out, stop listening and go, ooh, I got to do this.
Okay, so let's take the first question.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm going to do this by way of story because I love stories.
Sure.
Somebody that I coached who is suddenly taking over a whole new area of which he knows practically nothing about the technicalities of how a very technical area works.
Right.
And one of the reasons he hasn't gotten that job is fundamentally because that team doesn't want to follow him because he knows nothing. All right.
Yep.
Circumstances, suddenly he's got both teams. Right? And he is being asked by management to step out of his area of technical expertise and step up a notch and sit above both and do some kind of client interactions at a higher level, not at a detailed level. He is in a state of panic in absolutely every conversation with, isn't that just setting me up to be fired?
Right.
And at the end of the day, you're taking me out of the equivalent of a revenue stream. We kill those people. We don't keep them.
Yes.
Okay.
You are the sacrificial lamb.
And that is the question everybody who's an expert who's looking at first has to grapple with. And what you have to come to understand is, where does the value rest? So the value, yes, teams love being able to come to somebody where they can work out the details, but they also love being able to come to somebody who can say, right, I know somebody in this other group that you've not met who has a piece of the answer. Let me make that connection, broker that deal, and the two of you get together. You're going to find insight there you wouldn't get otherwise. So your value is in the ability to tap your network on behalf of your team's work. Okay?
So the first level of that is understanding that you are in many ways a relationship manager, and you're connecting people who have pieces of a puzzle rather than you being the person with the answer. You can see the two people who need to come together who wouldn't know to come together otherwise.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right. So, and it's not necessarily about being a fast study and learning it really quickly if you can. Okay, that's good. But that isn't what this is about. This is about using the broader context. Or another way you add value is you sit in a whole bunch of meetings that none of your team has access to. You have influence in those meetings. You have insight from those meetings. Bring that back to your team. Hugely useful for people to understand their connectivity, their purpose, their greater meaning in the larger organization. That's another way. And a third way you add value is if you're talking to your people about the advancement of their careers. I don't mean the next step. I mean the next skill set, the next opportunity, the growth of their own network, the raising of their visibility, and helping them do that. You add those three together, and I promise you, anyone would want to work for you. The problem is, though, it's not tangible. Like, I can't go home at the end of the day and check off the box. I did 1, 2, 3. That's why they need to keep me. I do my performance review. My team did a great job. But you have to see that as that's your job. That's your smoothing the wheels for people.
So just let me take a little pause there for a minute before we go on, because working with somebody right now, one of my clients who's a CEO of one of the large accounting firms. There is a matrix and it's called numbers. But this person's job is really about holding the vision and making relationships and connecting people. This person really understands that. But they're still measured on that metrics around money. And so they can, it's almost like we're living in two worlds. Right. And that's what I'm trying to have people grasp as they listen here, is that I get where you're coming from and I fully agree. But the argument on the other side is, yeah, but they're looking at my numbers.
Yeah.
So how do we bring that? Because like you said, it's intangible. We can't check the box and say, yeah, well, I've got this many billable hours, but I did this much training of my people. I did this much relationship building that might take 5 years to come to fruition.
Okay, so there is very clearly setting of priorities. And that's one of the things you do for the team that adds enormous value, being very crystal clear about what's the one thing we're going to do that makes the biggest difference to our productivity at the end of the day. But a manager that can identify or can help the team clarify the number one and number two priority is worth a lot of money, because that team will deliver. Okay, so yes, you can never take your eye off the ball of how much time am I investing and how much return are we going to get for that. And yes, I make some bets for the long run, but not every bet. Okay.
Well, but a lot of relationship is in not knowing that, right? It's like, I mean, I think that relationship building, I'm a relationship guy, and relationship building is a 10-to-1, meaning, you have 10 relationships and one pays off in the short term, one might pay off in the midterm, and one might pay off in the long term. It's a 10-to-1. And then you've got 7 that didn't, and maybe the 7 are the ones you thought would. So that's that intangible piece that I know our listeners, our viewers are going to go, yeah, but.
Yeah, I don't mean that you focus every ounce of energy on relationship, but if you should get better at having some criteria, for example, with the collaboration of your team. You don't have to have it all on your own, to say, what is it that it's about these 10 relationships that make them a good short-term, long-term, we don't know bet. And how much resources are we willing to put behind each one of those until we get clarity that it belongs in bucket 1, 2, or 3.
Yes.
That kind of conversation and questioning of your team is going to drive results, and is going to get them to think, not, I like this person and I want to keep developing it, but what's the size of the pie for all of us at the end of the day? Yes, I can keep developing the relationship, but I can't put too much energy in it. That's classic sales strategy in this modern world. Where is it going to pay off, and what does it take to get that payoff? What you're doing, though, Dov, is you're now moving into the second question, which is what's the work that has to be done?
Yeah.
And what work am I doing? Not just what my value is, but what's the work I'm doing? And one of the work you're doing is setting priorities. You're asking tough questions of the team that gets the team to think. So get to them engaged strategically, not that you just have the strategic vision, having them understand that and develop that skill for themselves. And you're also listening across the organization through your network to say, well, who said what over there about this client that we're working with? And does that resonate with what I'm hearing with my team or not resonate? Or is that a new piece of information we could tap and use and take advantage of? Or who else out there that I know has a relationship with this client? How do we leverage the collective for a better result?
Mm-hmm.
Eye on the results with the knowledge that the internal relationships are part of your engine.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. So now we go into the third of the pillars.
The big one.
The big one.
Yeah. This is the hardest one.
Yeah.
Because the relationships change. Let me take my favorite one on this one, which is conflict. So I'm sitting across the table from a colleague and we have a disagreement. And I don't mean we've had a knockdown, drag out fight. I mean, we fundamentally disagree about what's the right way forward.
Yeah.
I want A, you want B. Okay. Now, the normal pattern is to sit there and argue that I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go and get some data and I'll prove to you that I'm right. And we know that strategy, and lots of leaders will advise that strategy. If you have a conflict, you go back to the details, you go back to the data, you go back to the logic. Yep. Okay. But that's going to leave you feeling pretty lousy because what I'm doing is saying, I'm smarter than you and I'll show you.
Yep.
Doesn't go very well.
No.
I might win that argument, but next time I'm going to lose the battle to you because you're not going to be happy with me. You're going to come prepared for that. So instead,
and again, it's anti-collaborative as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's starting to understand it's not about needing to be right. It's about understanding the art of compromise in a way. What piece can I give on here that is good for the longer haul? Mm-hmm. I mean, if we were talking about this in terms of a customer, there would be no question about a give and take.
No.
I have to give a little bit to get something from the customer. I play the long. I mean, you would do that. We have to take that same set of perspective and turn it internal to your colleagues around the internal resource allocation decisions, strategy direction decisions, etc. So that learning to not rely just on the logic and the tune in to how did I leave that other person feeling in that exchange with me, I think that's the critical skill in the area of conflict. It applies absolutely everywhere else.
Yeah, that's very powerful. This idea of winning, I think, is extremely dangerous when you don't give the same measure to a customer that you would to a coworker. Very quickly, coworkers become, and even people you leading, become the enemy. And that's how we end up with this active disengagement, which is people working against you because nobody likes to be humiliated. And although you can feel great about winning the fight, as you said, you will lose the battle for sure. Yeah, that's really important.
I have a great story on this one. That's one of my favorites. A non-American story, by the way. The guy is running a big sales operation, and he needs a counterpart who happens to be sitting in the US to work more closely with him in order to really generate the results he's looking to generate. Okay. And the guy that I'm talking to, given the name of Jan, for lack of a better word,
sure,
or better name, is he's much more introverted. He's not that kind of charismatic, outgoing sort of personality, much more comfortable with the details and the numbers than he is necessarily with the chit chat, but certainly capable of doing that because he wouldn't be an effective salesperson if he couldn't do it. And he is very effective. Okay. So he's sitting down to talk to me about this person in the US who is self-centered, unwilling to travel, very US centric, doesn't care about anybody else, and a whole host of other negative attributions to the guy. And how am I supposed to possibly collaborate with this other person? And I just stopped and said, what do you know about him? What do you mean? Well, does he have kids? I don't know. What are his hobbies? I don't know. Is he married? I don't know. And he went, I got it. Because I followed that by saying, if that were a client, you would never go to a meeting without the client, without having answered those 3 questions before the meeting. So go figure them out.
Such a great and important, simple message. I'm constantly saying to people, the world has changed. And I'm not talking about pandemic. I'm just talking about the world has changed in business and in leadership. And one of the things we know about millennials, who are now 40 years old, by the way, for most people who think they're kids, they're not. The eldest, they're 40. And what we know is they are not looking for work-life balance. They're looking for work-life blend. They understand that their friends are at work, whether that's connection through Zoom or whether it's in person. They know that. And what that means is, would you approach having a new friend by hiding your information? Of course not. You would share. Social media has made everything visible. And it's really at the outer edge of how we're living. And so when people don't bother to find out about the people they're working with or they're looking to collaborate with or partner with, it's just like, why don't you just take a gun and shoot yourself in the foot? Yeah. Like, I'm like, I'm like you. It's like, it blows my mind. Why don't you know these things?
Right. Because we don't stop to think about it. It's not part of the checklist for our internal colleagues. And, Dov, I know I'm going to talk about a topic that's really close to your heart in just a minute, but I know that there are people in organizations who are more private as individuals, and they don't want to disclose a whole lot about them. That's way out of their comfort zone, and we have to give respect for that.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, not disclosing anything is going to kill the relationship. You can't get there without that. Which leads me to your favorite word, vulnerability.
Yes. Absolutely.
This is the one we have to learn to navigate in this 3rd pillar of how we relate to people, because it is what creates trust. And I like to talk about it again as a hybrid of 2. It's 1 part confidence.
Yes.
As vulnerability without confidence is not very good.
It's called whining, moaning, and complaining.
Or you look weak is the definition I would give. But at the same time, confidence without vulnerability, we typically call arrogance.
Absolutely.
Or narcissism or some other version of that thing. So learning to blend those 2, where I'm opening up a bit of myself, I'm putting a bit of me out, and I'm doing that in a way that is at the same time confident, is the sweet spot.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that people have got to learn about that is the emotional intelligence of discernment in the reciprocity of the vulnerability, meaning I am not going to be as vulnerable with somebody who is uncomfortable with vulnerability. Right. I have to measure that. I have to have enough conversation to go, oh, I can see this person's pretty guarded, so I'll let down a little of my guard with that person, making it okay for them to do it. But if I open up wide open, which I can do and I'm comfortable to doing, they just go, oh my God, and they just don't feel comfortable, and it actually makes them less vulnerable, not more.
Right.
So as leaders, we've got to go first, but we have to have the emotional intelligence. We have to be astute enough to pay attention to, did I just vomit on somebody who can't handle that?
Yeah.
And some people, you open up, you tell them your life story, they're like, oh my God, we're bonded forever. But you've got to have that reciprocity, and you've got to have the discernment to measure it. And you can only do that by finding out about the person first. Yeah. So, oh, Bob, I hear you're married. Yes. How long have you been married? Oh, 10 years. You have any kids? Yes. Why? Okay, I found the limit. Good.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, well, I'm married too. I've been married for 25 years. That's great. I have 3 kids. I lead in it a little bit. Now Bob can come back and say, well, I have 3 kids too. Oh, cool. How old are yours? And it's that paying attention, which is like mind-blowing to me that people don't do that. So they simply say, I'm not comfortable with vulnerability. I don't know that that's true, because if you're in a relationship of any kind, whether it's a friend or a partner, you've got to have some vulnerability, or else they won't be around you.
Yeah.
So it's a really important point. Thank you for bringing that up, Wanda. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. It goes by degrees. I put out a little bit and I see what I get back from you. And
Yeah.
I'm going to match in the principle of reciprocity. I'm going to match that. If you gave me just a tiny bit, then I'm going to give you a tiny bit more. If you gave me a lot, then I'm going to give you a bit more than that. It's
Yes.
the unfolding over time. That's
Yeah.
the secret sauce for building trust, which is where we really want to go at the end of the day.
Now, one of the things that I think most leaders understand, and the research certainly backs it up, is the importance of a diversified workforce,
Yep.
particularly when it comes to that upper management and leadership levels. However, you say that expertise and that expertise framework is actually, in many ways, limits women and limits minorities. Help us to understand that, if you would, please.
All right. So if I am not like the dominant coalition, my word to say whatever it is the majority is like, and that may be white and male, and it may be Hispanic or Swedish or engineers or any number of things. If I'm not like the dominant coalition, then I have to find my way of fit in the organization. The easiest, simplest, fastest, most secure way to find a fit is to show them, prove to them that I can deliver the goods, meaning I can execute, I know stuff.
Yeah.
And they can get quite comfortable with me being in an expert role because they can tap me for the expertise. They don't have to bring me into their inner circle. I don't have to participate in that whole inner, whatever that thing is like. I don't have to be part of that because they can tap me for the expertise. In effect, what they do is they're trusting my knowledge, and I'm relying on my knowledge to carry the weight for me, right? And what that does is box you forever into a single role.
Oh.
You're the executor. You're not the visionary or the strategist or the leader or the person with a gravitas or the any stuff. It keeps you a great number two. And here's how that game will get played for many women and other minorities. You're in the job, you're the number two, your boss loves you, rates you really highly, puts you on the succession list year in and year out, names you deputy, about as strong as you can get. The boss leaves, goes to take another job. The organization decides to bring somebody else in over you in that role. Okay? Your former boss will say to the incumbent, she's great. Keep her. She will take your crazy ideas and make them brilliant. Listen to her. She's the right person. She's what you need to make this job work. Okay? And you're sitting there saying, why didn't I get the job? And that's the position that most women and minorities are in day in and day out. And it's because they've learned to over depend on their expertise and their execution capability. They haven't taken the opportunities to show that spanning capability beyond, and that makes them look like they're not the quote unquote leader.
So let's say we've got a person of some minority, whatever it might be. As you said, could be that I'm not an engineer, who is in a 2IC position, second in command position. And that scenario you've just given, which I think is a really great example of it, where they keep getting looked over and passed over, and somebody else steps in, and then they do amazing things for that person and figure, okay, well, maybe it'll happen next time, but it just keeps not happening. What's that person sitting in front of you, wonder, what do you say to them? Like, because they probably want to scream or buy a gun or something at that point.
Go get a job in another company is what usually happens.
Yeah, exactly. And they usually go somewhere else. And I see this. I mean, I can think of somebody right now who did exactly that and ended up in a new 2IC position and was hailed as magnificent, etc. But it was still a 2IC. What do you say to them? What do you get them to go do?
All right. So I want them to understand the limitations of the expertise leader role. I want you to see the game you're playing and understand it's only half the game. There is a spanning game. And if I can get you to see that there's a need to do this spanning capability, then I want you to start to find ways of showing the organization your capability in that spanning role. So let's say one of the big questions is whether or not you have the strategic vision. Okay, then I want you to start talking about your view of what the opportunities are, your view of the market space, your view of the competition. You can say those without undermining your boss in any way whatsoever. And you're starting to show your strategic thinking capability. I want you to focus on who you know, because if you're in that role, who are you going to tap to be able to do the job? And it can't be the people that are working for you already. It's got to be broader. So start looking for those opportunities. And my favorite one is there are 100 ways in which we ask you to do additional work inside an organization. Lead the women's network, lead a recruiting effort, lead a charitable thing, just to name 3 very common ones. You're leading outside your expertise every time you take a leadership role in that, if you stop to see it as that and then talk about it. You know, you meet all sorts of people in all of those occasions and talk about how you are helping to get this group of volunteers to do something they wouldn't have done otherwise. There's your opportunity of showcasing what you can do without ever even leaving the job you're on.
But what you just said there is really important, because I think that we self-edit. So what I mean by that is that we will oftentimes not really share that we've done those things, because we think, well, I can't talk about that because this is my expertise. But what you're saying is, if you don't talk about that, you're actually stifling yourself, and you're not letting them know, or not letting them consider you in a bigger role or in a wider role.
Right.
Is that right?
That's right. And I want to underscore, if you like that number 2 position and you like being the expert leader, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
No.
But then don't get upset when you never get the top job.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the deal you're striking. Perfectly acceptable, but know the rules of the game.
Right. Now, the interesting thing about this, Wanda, is it's glaringly obvious, but I'm going to say it, which is you're an expert. You're an expert. So as the expert, and you're brought in as the expert, and companies are bringing you in around the world as the expert, how did you get to this? Because you're the expert. So I'm going to come in as the expert and tell you, don't be an expert. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, if you look at the range of topics that I cover in my book, you would, and if you look at my website and see the range of topics, you'd start to see really quickly, I'm not the deep expert in any one of them. What I do, how I run my life, and how I think I add value is that ability to skim across a broad range of topics and drill to sort of the core idea in those topics. So I think that's consistent with what I've said, just for the record. But how I came to this observation was in watching clients who were in that seat and not moving. Yes. Particularly in my professional services firm, where the concept of a generalist is kind of non-existent. You never give up your area of expertise, even if you're the global head of the law firm, the accounting firm, the financial services firm. You keep some core of your expertise. Yes. And I found that nobody was talking to people about this blend, this notion that, yes, you have some expertise, but you got to have more than that as well. And when I started to talk to people about the need to add more without becoming the expert of it, lights go off. I mean, you can just see it instantaneously. They go, that's what's happening. That's what's holding me back. And it was in that drove me to write the book.
Fabulous. You know, it's again part of the human condition, but we look at people at the end of their role. We see people as, oh, you're there, you know, and it's easy for us to go, well, I'll never get there. But that's not the journey of success for any of us. And I really love it if you would be willing to share with us a little bit about your journey, sort of, you know, and oftentimes I know I'm still in process. God knows how many years it's been. But what is one thing you did for a long time that really sort of got in your way and blocked you from the level of success that you now afford yourself?
How many would I like to talk about? And I think that's what everybody says. There's a lot of things that got in the way. I'm going to talk about something very early in my career because it was a very poignant moment for me. And I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with too. Yeah. And that was, had a fairly tough decision to make about a peer
Mm-hmm.
that I thought was underperforming. Now, I'm not responsible for that peer. I can't fire them,
Mm-hmm.
but I have to make a decision. Am I going to take an action to nudge them out of that seat or not nudge them out of that seat?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, sort of a bit of a soul wrestling moment.
Yeah.
It's easier to just stick and do my own thing, or not. And I remember a very wise advisor saying to me, well, Wanda, are you going to lead and stand out and take the risk? Or are you not going to lead? And it's that conscious decision. It was a turning point in my life to make the conscious decision that I wanted to lead. And therefore that meant I had to take some hard decisions, and I had to stand out, and I had to be open to the criticism that would come with it. And that was for me, that was a big turning point. And that's one of there's dozens of them.
Yeah, but the point you just brought up there is a really important piece, because when I look at people who are in that 2IC position, one of the things that I see as a characteristic is very often they suffer from some sort of sense of not good enough, some imposter syndrome. And along with that, the fatal combination is that plus they have a fatal case of nice. They want to be nice. They want everybody to like them. And so they perform amazingly, but they don't make those hard decisions. And it's one of the key factors in a leader, CEO position, top leader position, is you got to make decisions that other people won't like, that are, and it's the part of that visionary piece, is that you can see something bigger down the road. And it doesn't mean you're right, but you're willing to live with the consequence of it. And it's that nice, which would have been what you would have been, which is just to say, well, I'll just not say anything, versus stepping up. And because when you step up, the rule is it's whack-a-mole. When you stand up, somebody's going to bop you.
Yeah.
Somebody. I mean, yeah, sure. Some people might give you an applause, but somebody's coming with a whack-a-mole to clout you. When you're dealing with that, how do you get a leader to face that part?
So I'm going to come back to where I started this. To me, it's all a matter of balance. I don't want you to be so tough that you don't give people feedback and give them a chance to develop.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want you to take all year or all years to wait for them to come around and around and around, and they're not coming. There's a point at which you have to call the question. So talking about it as the balance for me is the starting point. And talking about, have you been reasonable? Is this a reasonable expectation? Have you given reasonable feedback? Have, what response, et cetera, those sorts of things I also find help. And that, well, I did this week. And then I want to turn it around and say, well, what are the consequences for you as a leader for not making that decision? And I want you to focus then on the consequences on the team, the consequences on the larger organization. And are you setting up for your team the notion that it's okay to be complacent? That I don't really have to be on my best game because, it doesn't really matter. Like I was talking with a leader, and so imagine 10 people on the team, 2 of whom are knocking it out of the park, 2 of whom are at the bottom of the barrel. The rest of the 6 are sort of split above and below the mean. Okay, kind of normal distribution.
Sure.
The 3 that are below the mean are not the worst ones on the team. So why do they need to dig deep? Because they got 2 really bad performers sitting there that is dragging everything down. You get rid of those 2 really bad performers, then those 3 are on a little bit more pressure of, whoa, I don't want to be in the bottom. Let me kind of up my game. So I think we get complacency, and it's getting focused on those implications that get people to make decisions.
It's a very good point. I think that complacency is the killer. The good enough, and it's an interesting dichotomy, isn't it? Because on one side is the I'm not good enough, and on the other side is it's good enough, and that desire to up level ourselves can't come from the insecurity of I'm not going to be good enough. It has to come from the place of I'm going to compete with myself and I'm going to up my game because I want to feel good about me and about what I can do.
Right.
And I really hear that in everything that you're saying, and that's centered to the message. I love that. What do you think, as we're sort of coming towards the end of the show now, but what do you think has really been missing in developing leadership capabilities? What is it that's missing in the way that it's being done right now?
Oh my gosh. There's so many things to say.
Yeah.
Number one, and my number one pet peeve, and the number one thing that we have to get straight is we don't actually tell people what they're doing well and not so well. We will give them management speak that says things like, "Oh, you're not strategic enough," or "No, you don't have enough gravitas," but that doesn't tell you anything other than there's a problem somewhere. So we don't help people understand the skill that's going to help them grow. So that's one thing. It's my number one thing. The second thing is we don't talk enough about balance. There is no right or wrong. It is always a blend of absolutely everything. There's no one characteristic that by itself is going to get you to win. Every characteristic has its dark side. So where's the balance there? And we don't talk about that enough.
No.
Really enough. And I think this notion that you could go to a leadership program for 5 days once every 5 years and have enough reflection to understand what you're doing well or not well is foolhardy. So
yeah, crazy. It's so crazy. And what's worse for me is those people who get to the leadership position and think, I don't do anything else. I made it. I'm the CEO.
Yeah.
Wow. You are so 100 years ago. Not 5 minutes ago. You're 100 years ago. Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? It's fascinating that people can do that. As I come towards the end of the show, I want to ask you, is there a company that you see, maybe not that you're working directly with, but just in observation, because I know you're paying attention to the industries and all that. Is there a company that's really doing a great job of what you've laid out in the book that you would point to and say, here's a company, like maybe you're aware of them, maybe you're not, but here's a company who is just really they exemplify exactly what I'm laying out in the book.
Okay. I'll give you two examples. One I don't know as well as I'd like to, and
sure.
I'll do that one first, and then I'll talk about the one that I do know in more depth. But Novartis has a new theme. One of their 3 big themes is about curiosity.
Yeah.
Okay. One of them is about being the unboss. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And the curiosity, and this notion of embracing curiosity is what a great concept. Now they've got to deliver that, bring that home and make that real. And yep. I think it's a bit of early days. There's a lot of commentary on that one in Paul Ashcroft and Garrett Jones' book, The Curious Advantage. They author that with Simon Brown at Novartis. Pretty impressed with that as a company. The other one that I am particularly impressed with is PwC.
Oh, really?
PricewaterhouseCoopers in the U.S. in particular. I don't know them globally as well as I know the U.S., but particularly for they have done some amazing things over the years for developing the leadership capability of their experts. And let's be clear, you're running an accounting firm or consulting practice, and you've got advisory practice, I should say, and you've got experts.
Yep.
So helping them to learn to coach. And they do this fabulous process, particularly for their underrepresented groups, where they pair a younger person who's on the cusp of making it to partnership with a more seasoned partner, and to go through every step of every piece of this that I have talked about to help that person understand where they're excelling, what they need to do, how they put themselves forward. It's just a very well thought out process. And I give them huge credit for how well they've done that.
Thank you for sharing that with us, because I think that it allows our listeners, our viewers to grasp there's nothing woo-woo about this. This is very practical. And when you get a company like PwC, which is not a small little firm, it's not a firm of 6 people who are, at a global level, who are doing this kind of work, it really shows the practicality and the importance of what it is that you are putting forward. So I thank you for that. Thank you, Wanda. As we come towards the end, there are 2 things I want to do to close. One, of course, is I want you to tell us where people can find out about you and all your resources, because I know there's lots. I know you've got a new Patreon channel, and I know there's all kinds of great stuff there. Aside from that, I know you have a podcast, but before we go to that, let's just go to what is the one practical thing you would say that, you would ask people to go do, preferably right away, but certainly within the next 24 hours to begin to integrate what it is that you've shared, because information is worth the hole in the donut. Transformation comes from application.
Okay. My favorite tactic.
Yes.
Go back to your company. So in the company in which you are, the culture in which you're working, identify a manager that you have enjoyed working for, that you think has been a fabulous leader and you admire for some qualities. And tell me what it is about them that you admire. And I think you're going to find that it's a pretty close match with what I've been talking about from being a spanning. It won't be about their subject matter expertise. It will be about a whole host of other things. That's the easiest way to start to see, and then have a role model that can show you what that journey might look like.
Yeah, I think that's great. And on top of that, if you decide to be courageous enough, you could go and have a conversation with that person, tell them what you appreciate, and ask them how they did it.
Yeah.
That would be even
better. Even better.
Yeah.
And I should say, and buy the book, because there'll be 1,000 questions in there that you could take to any of those leaders. How do you do this? And how do you do that?
So talking about buying the book, which we of course recommend that people do, please tell us more about you, your resources, the book, and where people can find out more about all those resources.
Okay. All right. So resources, the company website is leadership-forum.com. You'll find about all the sorts of products and services and ranges, stuff that I do there. The website about me is wandawallace.com. And it's my point of showing a little bit more vulnerability about me, who I am as a person. So you'll see some things there as well. We have a brand new subscription channel, and you can find out about that by going to outofthecomfortzone.com. That will link you to the podcast. That will link you to the add-on first level service for subscription. The podcast is free, obviously, but the first level, we get a little more depth, is available there. We're starting a new community group, and we'll be launching some online courses from that spot as well. So outofthecomfortzone.com.
Fabulous. And of course, we'll make sure all those things are posted into the show notes. Wanda, thank you for being with us. It's been a pleasure and honor. We're deeply grateful for you and everything that you've shared. And I encourage all of you to make sure that you do follow through with all those resources. And remember that you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any of our past episodes inside of our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. Just look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. It doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your true capability. To find out more about how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker, leadership strategist, or executive consultant for yourself or your organization, go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Because unified meaning, or as we call it, finding your dragon fire, is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness in all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you need to have both expertise and be able to be a spanner. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your dragonfire to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.